Good morning to everyone. My name is Karen Schaefer, and I am the chair of the Council of Metropolitan Area Leagues of Women Voters, or as we go by the acronym CMAL. And I welcome you to our March quarterly program, which will focus on the Livable Communities Act, a grant program administered by the Metropolitan Council under state law. Before I introduce our panelists, I would like to mention and remind people that the Council of Metro Area Leagues of Women Voters, we are an organization that encourages informed and active participation in regional government. We work to increase understanding of regional policy issues and influence regional public policy through education and advocacy. And so today's program is part of our educational outreach. As you may or may not know, the League of Women Voters, CMAL included, we are very proud to be nonpartisan, and we neither support nor oppose candidates or political parties at any level of government. I want to also let you know that this morning's program is being recorded by Quad Cities Community Television, or QCTV, which serves parts of Anoka County, and we are very, very delighted that they're interested in our program here. I'm going to ask people, we have great speakers. We have a great panel this morning. Please put your questions into the chat, and then I will pass them along and feed them along to our panelists so that we can, have a little fun here besides, learning. We want to have a little bit of enjoyment and interaction, but if you put your questions in the chat, and then I will move them along to the speakers as best we can. So, and I want to also thank Marty Mix. She is our Zoom host and has been working with the panelists and QCTV to make sure that everything goes smoothly. And QCTV has asked us to remind people to mute themselves. It just keeps the quality of the recording up. So I am very, very pleased to introduce to you two very seasoned, talented professionals from our metro area who will help us understand the Livable Communities Act program. First of all, I'd like to introduce Tara Beard. She's the manager of the Livable Communities Act and regional housing programs at the Metropolitan Council. And as I see, she's been there since 2014. So she knows that organization inside and out. She does have prior public service at Hennepin County, the city of Hopkins, and the city of Minneapolis, and she holds her Master's of Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Minnesota. So I wish to extend a warm welcome to Tara Beard. Now, we also have Jennifer Faulkner from the city of Burnsville, where she is the Community Development Director. And I believe she has been with the city since 2005. So she really knows Burnsville, all square footage of it. She has, but besides her experience in Burnsville, she has prior experience in the city of Prior Lake and the city of Brooklyn Park. And she has her Master's of Urban Planning from that well-known hotbed of urban planning education, Minn State University at Mankato, which has given, in addition to the University of Minnesota, Mankato, of course, is well known for its leadership in urban planning. So I'm going to ask Tara if you would kindly go first and explain to us what this program is about and where all these millions and millions go. And then we'll ask Jennifer to go second, and she's going to give us the municipal or the grantee experience. So we'll get a good picture of how this program works. And now we've got at least 30 people signed on. So welcome to everybody. And Tara, if you would take it away.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that generous introduction. Can everyone see the screen that I'm sharing? Y'all can see the presentation? Great. So as Karen mentioned, I'm Tara Beard, and I manage the Livable Communities Act. I love presenting to this group. I've had the privilege of presenting to this group for many, many years, even before I managed LCA, which I've only been doing for about 2.5 years now. And I'm only the third manager of the Livable Communities Act program since the act was passed by our state legislature in 1995. So it's been really exciting to sort of be the third generation of kind of managers of this program, because while a lot is specified in that statute and that state statute, there's certainly a lot left up to interpretation. And if anyone wants to talk online about the fun of interpreting statutory language and understanding how to implement it as it was intended, I will definitely have that cup of coffee with you. So I'm going to move along here because I know there's probably a lot of variety in the group in terms of how much you already know about the program. And as Karen said, I would love to take questions, and hopefully I'm going to kind of hit the right balance of what folks already know and what folks might not know. So what is the Livable Communities Act? The statutes in state law are noted there as the header. It's a voluntary program. So it was intentionally created in '95 by our legislature to be a program that cities can participate in. And by cities, I mean cities and townships in the 7-county metro region, which is, I believe the number is about 184 total cities and townships. And cities that do choose to participate can apply for competitive grants. And the grants are really meant to support the council's role generally in the region, which is to advocate for orderly and economical development. So it's all about growth. How is this region growing? What is the safest, stablest, most equitable way for us to grow as a region? And how can these grants incentivize that type of growth with funding toward development, redevelopment projects? There is quite a few $1 million awarded each year, as Karen mentioned, and last year over 25 million was made available to the what we currently have, I believe, are 76 participants in the region that participate in the program. And so that is quite a lot of money. It hasn't always been that much every year, but especially in the last couple of years, the council has made some incredibly generous additional funding available in addition to the base amounts available through the statute, particularly for our local housing incentives account program within LCA, which is the one program in LCA that is explicitly for the creation and preservation of affordable housing. So this has been one of the key ways that this council has addressed the affordable housing crisis in the region, which is to add additional council dollars beyond the statutory base amounts for at least the affordable housing program within LCA. Let's see. So what are the goals of LCA and statute? What are these orderly and economical development patterns that this money is supposed to be funding? And it's called out pretty specifically. So to create and preserve living wage jobs, to create and preserve affordable housing and a full range of housing options, to create incentives for a full range of housing choice, and incentives for compact and efficient development. And that really is getting at, the efficient use of our infrastructure and our resources. So our sewer and wastewater, which the council also manages and owns, certainly our transit and transportation options, as well as other sorts of infrastructure that are, most efficiently used when we build and grow in a smart and efficient way. And then finally, the LCA language just explicitly says that the council's regional development guide, and that's kind of the regional comprehensive plan. If you think about comprehensive plans for cities, the council also has to every 10 years update its regional development guide, or kind of a regional comp plan with its kind of policy and goals and intentions of the council. And those are also supposed to be folded into considerations for LCA funds beyond just what was mentioned in statute. So I'll give you a great example of something that isn't mentioned in statute, but you see woven throughout all of the LCA programs, and that is equity, because equity is a key policy direction that the council has given through its regional development guide, which is commonly referred to as Thrive 2040. So that's where kind of, those are the goals of the program and what we need to try to use as the overarching umbrella under which to score and evaluate and fund projects that we get. So I mentioned that we have 76 participating communities. And when I say that we have 184, I believe, cities and townships, but only 76 participants, that's a little bit, that can be a little bit misleading in terms of interest in the program, because the program is specifically meant to incentivize, basically smart growth and development. It's really only applicable and useful to cities that are experiencing growth and are experiencing specifically sewer service growth, which is the kind of growth needed to support development projects that are going to be competitive because of their efficiency, because of the number of units they're creating or the number of jobs they're creating. So when you see this map, a lot of these townships especially do not have the kind of growth or sewer service growth, at least, that really makes livable communities a program of interest to them, or a program where their types of growth, however small, are going to be competitive against other projects. I'd say the sweet spot, like the actual kind of cities that I think could benefit from LCA, is probably somewhere in the 110, 120 cities and township range. And so I would love to see more cities participate, but there's a lot of reasons why some cities choose to participate and some don't. One of those reasons might be what cities have to do to participate. So I mentioned that this is a voluntary program, but it does require some steps that a city has to take voluntarily to be able to apply for funds. And these are outlined in the statute, so they're not anything that staff or even council members of the Met Council can waive or change without legislative change. So that includes adopting affordable and life cycle housing goals. And those are basically, if you're familiar with the comprehensive plan process and the requirements of the housing chapter of the comprehensive plan, you will know that the council, a big part of comprehensive planning is understanding forecasted growth in the region, forecasted growth within each city. Helps us understand what kinds of parks, transportation, sewer system capacity that we need to look at as the owners of those systems at the Met Council. So when we are doing that, we allocate a share of that growth to each city of households that we expect to come to the region in the next decade that would be earning an amount that would count as needing affordable housing. So what we call 80% of area median income. So a household earning 80% of the area median income or less, we're going to say is a household, a low or moderate income household, and needs what we call affordable housing. That's how we kind of standardize the rent amounts and the income amounts that help us understand, when do we want to fund something? What are we trying to help further, and what is more market rate housing? So cities, I'm going into all this because I think it's really important to know that cities adopt affordable and life cycle housing goals that are based on that allocation of need in their comprehensive plan. So we ask cities to look at that allocation of need that says, hey, we're expecting about 100 new households over the next decade. And we're expecting that about 35 of those households are going to earn less than 80% of the area median income or less. So 30 of those households, did I say 30 or 35? Sorry. 30 of those households, will need affordable housing. And you have to, per state law, plan for those households in your comp plan by guiding high density residential land, because 98% or so of new affordable housing built in the region is higher density, is at densities well above 10, 20 units per acre. But to adopt affordable and life cycle housing goals to participate in LCA, we say, hey, we know that we can forecast to our heart's content, what we expect for growth in the region and growth at different incomes in the region and in your particular city is going to be. That does not mean we think cities have the capacity or ability or funding available to simply build those units, right? And so we worked with our partners at Minnesota Housing, who fund the vast majority of new affordable housing in the region, in the state. And we say, you know, let's look back 5 years or so and look at kind of what an average cost per unit of an affordable unit is, and kind of estimate what share of that growth in need for affordable housing we are expecting to have funding for over the next decade. And long story short, you know, and it's definitely back of the envelope, art versus science. It's not an exact number. This is for long range planning, so no one is claiming that we know these numbers are perfect. But essentially, we came to about 55% of that need we're expecting to increase in the region for affordable housing units is actually going to be fundable if we kind of look at the past years of funding and how many units we've been able to provide. So to participate, all that is to say that to participate in LCA, cities have to adopt affordable and life cycle housing goals that are approximately 55% of that allocation of need for affordable housing that they're expecting over the coming decade. I do think that that is one of the reasons some communities do not want to participate in the program. Most communities are okay with that. They recognize that even adopting those goals does not create a situation where there's any penalties for not creating those units. It's not the city saying, we will build these units. This is our, you know, we will take this on. It's simply saying that, you know, we will we own, you know, that there is the potential to seek funding to build at least this share of our need, and we will try to do that. We will, in good faith, try to make those units available in our partnerships with developers, in our exploration of our own funding capacity to support affordable housing, et cetera, et cetera. So some communities are still, and there's been great political change over the last, you know, 5 or 10 years, as I'm sure you all are aware, but some communities are still a little bit wary of saying, you know, we're going to officially adopt and make it this city's policy to support the creation of this many affordable housing units. So I don't think that's the only reason cities don't participate, but I do think it's one of them. Moving on, I'll try not to get so in the weeds with everything. Sorry, there are more onion layers than you can imagine in this program. Another requirement stated in the statute is to have a housing action plan, and that isn't very well defined in the statute. And so in the past, the practice has basically been to say, well, as long as the housing chapter or housing element of the city's comprehensive plan covers kind of what a housing action plan should have, we're going to say you're probably, you know, covering that. And if not, cities have put together, you know, actual documents that are kind of a housing action plan that shares how they intend to support that adopted number of affordable and life cycle housing units that they have in their adoption if they choose to participate in their ordinance. We're trying to simplify that a little bit more for 2 reasons. One is that really the housing element of your comp plan really is a 10, 20, 30-year look out. It's very high level, and it's meant to be somewhat broader and you know, just bigger than kind of what I would consider a housing action plan, which in the statute really seems to intend how each year is the city addressing those affordable and life cycle housing units that they adopted as their goal. So it's asking for something a little bit more on the ground and specific. So we have an annual affordable housing production survey that we send out every year, and cities are great about responding. We don't have perfect response rates, but we get a lot of great information from them. And what we've decided to do for this decade for the program is to simply have a few questions in that survey about how the city is finding opportunities, challenges, et cetera, to create affordable housing units to help meet that goal that they've adopted. Again, it's not about a penalty. It's about collecting information. It's about sharing best practices, and it's about understanding what cities need from us to help build those units that we've all agreed are goals to build. So we're trying to kind of make that more embedded in something that cities already do, so that it's not a separate specific thing cities have to do. Finally, in statute, the creation of something called an affordable and life cycle housing opportunity amount. The acronym for that is ALHOA, but we often get ALOHA. which is totally fine. But that's basically a calculation based on a city's tax capacity. And by the authors of the LCA, as best as I understand, really wanted to make sure that cities had some skin in the game, that cities were really, that this program was a reward program for cities that were doing as much as they could to help support full range of housing choices and affordable housing in their communities. So this calculation based on tax capacity is a spending amount that cities have to say we spent that year. Each year it's calculated and shared with cities for what the following year's number is. They have to share that they've spent that much on some sort of affordable housing opportunity. So it could be funding down payment assistance programs. It could be staff or consultant time developing an affordable housing policy, like an inclusionary housing policy. It could be lost tax increment when tax increment financing has been used to support affordable housing production. We work really hard with cities to kind of, be really flexible on how they can show that they're meeting their affordable and life cycle housing opportunity amount. And they're not insanely egregious amounts. I mean, always, again, depending on who you ask. But for example, when I worked for the city of Hopkins, our LHOA amount, so this was, probably 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, but the LHOA amount was around $80,000 in a year of the city's budget we needed to show was spent towards affordable housing opportunities. So it's certainly gone up from there, but I can't imagine it's gone up much more than that. So that's kind of just an estimate of the dollars we're talking about. So those are the requirements to participate. And again, it's always a source of tension, understandably. This is one of those things where there's a really good intention in statute, and how it plays out can be really difficult. As a staff, at a staff level, we have been working with our government affairs folks to reach out to the governor's office and get support for removing. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me move on. I will get back to that. I'm just going down rabbit holes, and that's not going to be good for time. Okay. So within the Livable Communities Act are specifically defined programs. So I mentioned that these grant programs are to support redevelopment and development, but then there are specific programs that support redevelopment and development in different ways. So one of the programs we have is the tax-based revitalization account. That account is for the cleanup of contaminated soil. So the investigation and cleanup of contaminated soil for the purposes of redevelopment. And that is funded through a unique regional taxing situation called fiscal disparities, which again, I won't get into, but some of you are probably somewhat familiar with. But just to say that particular fund, which is $5 million a year, comes out of fiscal disparities. It doesn't come out of an additional tax levy on metropolitan council residents. Then the local housing incentives account is another account specified in the statute. As I mentioned before, that is our account that is specifically for the creation of and preservation of affordable housing. And for that reason, we've always pooled LHIA money with Minnesota Housing's annual request for proposals, and kind of been one of their funding partners, using our LHIA money to contribute toward a variety of affordable housing preservation and construction projects that Minnesota Housing gets applications for things like low-income housing tax credits or housing infrastructure bonds. And then we have some money from LHA in that pot as well, and can help kind of fill the gaps and get some of those projects funded all the way. And then finally, our largest account is the Livable Communities Demonstration Account, and its sister program that was created in 2011, the Transit Oriented Development Account. And that's our broadest account. And it is funded by an additional tax levy that the council is given authority to administer through the LCA. And for this year, I believe we had 13.6 million available for 2021, using the calculation in LCA for the amount we can levy for these programs. So those are the broadest programs, and they're really kind of getting at not specifically one thing or the other, but just looking at all of those LCA and Thrive goals that I mentioned before, kind of working in tandem. So how do we create walkable, quality, livable spaces that are increasing, housing choice and or job access, and that are connecting to transit, that are connecting to other amenities, kind of things you might think of as smart growth type projects might be good candidates for LCDA and LCDA TOD. And I skipped over the funding source for LHIA. LHIA is only funded 1.5 million in the base funding in the statute as described back in 95. So you can imagine how far 1.5 million went toward affordable housing in 95. Probably not that far, but you can imagine how even less far it goes now 25 years later. So the LCDA fund increases, or at least can increase every year, because it's based on tax capacity. And so in theory, that amount almost always goes up every year, what we could tax to support that program. But LHIA is simply $1 million from that LCDA pot plus $500,000 from the council's general levy. So no additional taxing for LHIA. And as I mentioned, the council has found other sources in their general fund levy to add to that, so that we can offer more than 1.5 million per year for affordable housing projects, which is great. But we have been working with the legislature and the governor's office to talk about larger sources of base funding for that program every year, so that every year I don't have to go beg the council to add millions to that pot, which is kind of what happens. Okay, so moving on. A little bit more about the tax-based revitalization account. I mentioned it's for the cleanup of polluted land for jobs. Some details about the base funding and source that I already kind of covered. In terms of interest and demand, which I thought y'all might find interesting, I'd call the TBRA interest pretty much healthy. Like we always get a little bit more requests for funding than we have available, but not an egregious amount. And it allows us to both kind of make sure we have a good slate of competitive projects to consider funding, but that we also feel confident that there's some competition to help inspire and elevate really good projects. And then some unique features, that definitely speak to kind of the politics of, regional government, is that no more than half of the TBRA funds can be granted to Minneapolis or St. Paul, and no more than 75% of the funds can be granted to the two central cities combined, as long as there are eligible projects from suburban communities that could be funded. So we basically use a scoring system and fund moving down the scoring line until we hit that cap, and then we move to just the projects that are not in Minneapolis or St. Paul to get to the remainder. The local housing incentives account, as I mentioned, 1 million from general levy. Oh, I think I flip-flopped those. I'm sorry. It's 1 million from the general levy and 500,000 from LCDA funds that base amount. The interest demand for LHI cannot be overstated. It is, I've been asked by legislators, well, how much, dedicated funding would you want? How much could you put out the door? I have literally played with numbers and need and cost, and once I hit 333 million that I felt confident I could put out the door every year, I just stopped and just said, there is no amount, that's too much. So, we funded, I think it was, I want to say 6 multifamily projects with LHIA in 2021, 43 applications went unfunded. So it's just, it can't be overstated. How many projects are ready to go, are ready to meet this need, and we just don't have enough funding for it. And I mentioned the unique feature of LHIA being pooling the funding with Minnesota Housing. And I guess I didn't realize that I'd done that animated. So there's a beautiful project in Edina that we helped fund through LHIA for youth experiencing homelessness. Then the Livable Communities Demonstration Account. Again, the focus is kind of the broadest of all. So it can be for a jobs project, for a housing project. You'll see mixed use projects and a lot more focus on kind of the quality of the site and the livability and placemaking of being, just really, really great developments. It's definitely oversubscribed, and even more so in the last couple of years. We've seen interest really begin, 2021 were banner years. We had the most applications for the most funding we've ever seen for both LCDA and the TOD programs. We also offer pre-development funds for LCDA. So if you are working on a project with a developer, a city is working on a project with a developer and needs some help with extra funding for more robust community engagement, maybe some market studies to understand if some units could be affordable, things like that, you can use our pre-development funds. Maybe stormwater design assessment to see if you could more efficiently manage stormwater on the site. Those kinds of things are pre-development activities we can fund through this program. And then TOD is a unique program within itself, again, started in 2011 to really kind of separate those LCDA applications from projects that are right by like really high frequency transit, LRT stations or BRT stations or really high frequency bus stops, because those inherently, those projects tended to be more dense, tended to have more, connections to transit. And so competing against projects that aren't that close to high frequency transit stations, wasn't quite the dynamic we wanted. So we kind of separated that out and created this separate TOD to just evaluate those types of projects against each other, and then regular LCVA projects against each other. And pre-development's also available through for TOD. The interest and demand for TOD kind of ebbs and flows, and we're really interested. We were really surprised in 2021 to see such huge requests for TOD because of the uncertainty of transit in light of the pandemic, and the future of certain transit projects. But so far, we have not seen a lessening of interest for those programs. So since 1996, when the first awards were made, we have awarded over 1,200 LCA funding awards for over $444 million. And you can see that these awards can be found all throughout the region, as far north as St. Francis, as far south as Elko New Market. I'll totally be honest, it's a constant effort to try to encourage and see as many applications as we'd love to see from more of our suburban communities. And a lot of that just has to do with the purpose of the program and having that align with the city's unique, growth goals and development goals. So sometimes there's a little bit of, the council's kind of moving in this direction, and suburban communities might not be ready for that kind of development yet, or have different things that they're dealing with. And so it's a constant challenge to create a transparent, fair program that holds everybody to kind of the same standard when we have very different contexts across the region. And that's a unique challenge and a really fun opportunity to try to figure out. But regardless, I think I don't think you can argue that we've had a huge impact helping create and preserve over 50,000 housing units, over 25,000 of which were affordable. We've helped create or preserve over 57,000 jobs and helped increase the regional tax base by over 133 million, and helped clean up over 2,500 acres of contaminated land. So I bet you thought I was never going to stop talking. I wondered if I was ever going to stop talking. And believe it or not, I have a billion things I could continue to tell you about. But I'll stop there, and I'll leave it to Karen to tell me if we're going to answer some questions now or let Jenny speak and then get to questions as a group. Thank you so much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Tara, very much. We have a couple of questions, so why don't we just take care of those right away, and then we'll catch Jenny's perspective. One question, in terms of the program support for affordable housing, is there any aspect of your program that addresses what we would call deeply affordable housing, beyond the 80% median income?
Thank you. I love whoever asked that question. The answer is yes. So my take on this, and I've been managing LCA for 2.5 years. Prior to that, my role was housing policy analyst at the council. So I've been embedded in regional housing policy data, thought, conversations for over 8 years in this region. And it felt to me like 4 or 5 years ago, more and more funders started to say, we especially want to fund 30% AMI. That's our shorthand for deeply affordable housing. And really, it's just to kind of acknowledge that there is a point at which making rents affordable at certain incomes becomes so much more, the gap is so much larger financially that it's almost like apples and oranges when you think about how to fund an affordable housing project that has units affordable at, say, 60% AMI, which is around $63,000 a year for a family of 4. And 30% AMI, which is a little over $30,000 for a family of 4. And so, these are working families that simply have lower wage jobs, and there isn't a single unit available anywhere in the region at 30% AMI. The vacancy rate is 0 at 30% AMI. And when you look at how the breakdowns of households spending more than 30% of their income toward rent, and the growth in households coming to the region that earn 30% AMI or less, when you look at those two numbers and you say, okay, this is what we need to be doing, and then you look at what's getting built every year, we're landing somewhere around 10%. We're building around 10% each year of the need for new units at 30% AMI. In the 31 to 50% AMI range, we're building around 50% each year of the growth in need. And at 51 to 80% AMI, we're building over 100% of the growth in need. And so there is a huge, huge disparity there. And people talk about affordable housing, and they're really talking about everything affordable under 80% AMI or maybe under 60% AMI, depending on who you're talking to. But understanding the difference in those two worlds, if you're trying to build at 30% AMI, rents affordable at 30% AMI, and up there at the 60% is like night and day. And so I took a look at my own program, which says, just like every other project, every other funding program out there, we prioritize units affordable at 30% AMI. And the problem that I'm finding is that projects like this often make everything important, and so nothing is important. And so is there a scoring criteria that adds points to projects that are deeply affordable? Yes. What percentage of the total score is it? Very, very, very little. So we're saying we prioritize it. We're not lying, but we're not like there, because for me, it was like, I need to unpack this mystery of how everybody is seeing these numbers, seeing the need, seeing the disparity in supply and demand across levels of affordability. All the funders are saying that they see that and that they're going to prioritize it. And yet no increase from this 10, 11% each year of getting funded and built. And so staff at the council right now are working on a deep, deep dive into this, trying to understand, is it that we aren't getting enough applications for 30% AMI? Is it that those types of projects are not getting funded despite prioritization? And if so, why? Is there something harder about 30% AMI that is more than just needing more dollars because the rents have to be even less? And we have, some sense of some of these answers, but we want to be really smart and not just kind of go on our guts. And so we're doing a ton of interviews, explorations, and we're doing our own analysis of how many points we give for 30% AMI and if it's really enough to make a difference in how we end up funding projects. So it's such a good question. It is not a simple answer, and it's not an answer I think I have yet, but to just unearth that we have this huge disparity in supply and demand once you go into the levels of affordability and not just thinking of affordability broadly. And I'll also just plug that we know that the impacts on everybody else, of folks not being able to afford housing, they get more and more pronounced the more low income the household is. So when we are not funding, when we're only building 10% of the housing needed at 30% AMI each year, the impacts on other resources that happen to all of us are much, much greater than if we were only funding 10% of units needed at 60% AMI. I'm not saying that those aren't bad impacts, and I'm not saying that those families don't need that housing desperately. I'm just saying that it's simply not the same impact to underbuild at units affordable to a working household that simply has low wage, minimum wage jobs. And so I think that is a huge, huge issue. We are trying very hard at the regional level to unearth it and unpack it and provide solid, specific recommendations for how we can address that. And we're on, my colleague Hillary Lovelace I'm helping her oversee kind of her exploration of this issue, and she's expecting to present to our council in probably August on kind of her findings and recommendations for how we can better address that mismatch in need and production. And if it is just about dollar amounts or if, et cetera, et cetera. I'll stop there because I'm sorry, I can never stop.
That's a really interesting topic, Tara. Thank you. Now we have another question, and if it's not within the Met Council domain, that's fine. But she's asking when affordable housing is constructed and supported by public subsidies such as livable communities or TIF, when all of those subsidies end and then the housing is no longer required by law to be affordable, does your agency have any role in helping people when some of these buildings switch over to a more market rate rent, or is that something that you don't really have much to do with?
We definitely are engaged in that domain, but not excessively. So I'll just say that we get applications for what we call preservation. And generally what we mean by preservation of affordable housing is exactly what the question is describing. So projects that got funding from us, from tax credits, from TIF, and that requirement says you have to maintain the affordability of these units for 15 years or 20 years or 30 years. And then what happens when that time frame is up? Sometimes the owner sells to the private market at quite the profit, and the units are lost. And obviously affordable housing advocates are not fans of that. But there has yet to be a really high quality kind of shared effort to kind of know exactly when that's happening, where in the region, and intervene early. Some cities kind of know their affordable developments and when expiration is going to happen. Some are paying less attention to that. There is some data on it in the region. The best source would be Housing Link. Has data on when the last known public subsidy that triggers affordability and when that expires. So you can kind of troll that and see, oh, okay, these are the ones that are going to expire in the next 5 years. And when we were reviewing housing elements of comprehensive plans in these last couple of years, one of the things we did was say, hey, cities, Housing Link is telling us you have 3 projects, 3 affordable housing developments in your city that before the 2020 decade is over are going to expire. Can you share any policy intent in your comp plan about efforts to extend that? So that's from the policy side, how we kind of try to influence that, but it's pretty marginal. But when an owner does want to extend the contract and there is some sort of intervention either by the owner or by the city or some other, maybe affordable housing developers taking notice and expressed interest in acquiring the property, we have funded through LHIA those projects because often they're hitting a point in age where they need some repair. They need some updates. They need some code updates. It's a 20-year project. They need new windows, they need new something. And so it almost always comes together, preservation and rehabilitation. And so we have funded the rehabilitation of some of those projects in exchange for an extension of the affordability limit with the owner. So we'll grant you this money, update your kitchens, your windows, et cetera, and you've signed a contract to extend another 15 years the affordability of the project. So we're not really on the front end sort of out finding them. We don't have capacity for that, and we can't apply to ourselves even if we found those units. But we do try to elevate that as an issue and something cities and other advocates can find information on and try to be proactive about. And then again, we do fund the rehab of projects like that.
That's very interesting to learn. One more quick question, and this question has to do with the fact that in a lot of areas, seniors, citizens who are retired but own their homes, what they need is access to personal assistance, help in the home. And the key question there is, does Metropolitan Council do anything to address the living wage question so that workforce continues to be developed, or is that beyond the ken of Metro Council?
Yeah, I have to say it really is, unfortunately, the latter. That is just not an authority that the council's kind of given to have oversight on. The use of these funds, which are really our only source of incentivizing dollars to get the kinds of developments and growth that we want to see. Those are very specifically to be for development and not for individual kind of support. And the council has some broad economic development framework pieces. We've sort of dipped our toe into partnerships with greater, MSP or the Center for Economic Inclusion and tried to kind of high level, put forward some policy direction around economic resiliency and economic mobility. And that of course ties into things like jobs and wages. And I think we have a long way to go. I mean, it's not explicitly called out again in statute as one of our authorities or one of our roles. So we do have to be really careful. And even if we wanted to push the envelope there, it's that, do we have the capacity to, while we're also doing the things that the statutes do say that the council is supposed to do. So, you know, I would say kind of stay tuned. I do have some intention in 2023 of working to really unpack and explore all of the scoring criteria for LCA that gets at job development and economic mobility, and really look at if we are having the impact we intend, if we know how to score projects for that, are we able to score projects for that? A lot of times projects just say it's commercial space. We don't know who's going to be in it yet, right? At this point. So so there are some challenges there at the roles, at the stages in which we do play a role is a little, we haven't figured out, I think, our lane in that arena yet, I guess is what I would say, or if we have a lane. And it's a little bit above me, frankly, to decide that. But I can say that as a group, we are aware of it. We think about it. We are trying to see if there are ways to address that in our scoring criteria, in our technical assistance, et cetera. But it's not our strong suit, and it's not a real specific role that the council plays.
Well, thanks very, very much. I'd like to turn the floor over to Jenny Faulkner, and keep your questions coming. It's very helpful to see them. And so Jenny, are you ready to screen share here?
I am. I just real quick before I do that, I want to thank you, Karen, and the group for having me, and I'm happy to be here this morning. And now I will give this a try. There we go. And one more button. There we go. How does that look? Thumbs up? Okay. So I think I just want to start by saying, as Tara said, she gave a great presentation. You know, each cities look at this program differently. Burnsville being a fully developed community, I'll just start by saying this is a great program. This is a great program for a community like Burnsville that's developed and in redevelopment mode. And so we've been a partner of the program since the mid-90s. Tara, thanks for saying the year. I knew it was the mid-90s, 95, 96, somewhere in there, since the onset. We have been a participant. And so as part of that, as Tara mentioned, we have adopted affordable housing goals. We have our comprehensive plan. We have a separate housing plan. And we spend those necessary funds every year to be qualified. So this program, from the city standpoint, has supported a lot of our redevelopment, affordable housing, and property cleanup initiatives over the last 25 years. And I'll highlight some examples of that. And then one key thing part of this is that you have to have a developer partner on these projects. Like the city can't just apply for this for something that's going to happen at some point in the future. It needs to kind of be an immediate type of development. It also helps to have like a specific redevelopment plan. And the first project I'm going to talk about is Heart of the City. You know, that was a specific plan that was put together with some goals and outcomes that help bolster the need for the scoring and what the end product's going to be to meet Met Council's objectives, to meet the city objectives. So it really does help to have a plan. And all of the examples I think that I'm going to show you today, we do have kind of a redevelopment plan in place for those specific site areas. So as far as Burnsville goes, like I said, we started early on with the plan, with participation. So in 1999, as part of our Heart of the City planning project, we received $1.6 million for infrastructure costs. And it's really interesting when you go back and look at the history, which predates me just a little bit at the city. Heart of the City started as a way to improve the streets, add sidewalks, a little beautification project, and it snowballed into a complete, 50, 100 acre redevelopment project. So when the community got together, well, what else can we do? And does this empty building have to be here? And this gas station's right on this prominent corner. What can we do? And so this did morph into an entire redevelopment project for the city. Then in 2001, we applied for another grant, and we were lucky to be awarded $2.5 million from the Met Council, and that helped us to create Nicollet Commons Park, and also land acquisition for some public parking structures. I believe we're a part of that. Also, what this program does, it helps leverage other grants and other public financing tools get put into the pot. And like Tara said, the demand far exceeds the pot of money that's there. So this does allow leveraging of other grants, either through the county, maybe some federal grants. We did get some of that in Heart of the City, other public funding sources that can come to the table. And when we look at redevelopment, what we're looking for is ways to add significant private investment in public projects, right? So we want to get the most bang for our buck on these projects. And so the slide on the left is kind of that plan that the visionaries of Burnsville had back in the late 90s, early 2000s. This is what we want this area to be. And you'll see the park in the middle right here. There was an early plan for some kind of performing arts center just to the west of it. And it's amazing. It's not exact, things aren't exact, but they're pretty darn close when you go back and look at this plan. This is Nicollet Avenue. This is Burnsville Parkway. Over here is the Cub Foods that was put in the early 2000s. And then this graphic here on the right is a current kind of aerial shot of where we are today. And so you'll see all the new redevelopment and the apartments and the office building here, the Performing Arts Center, the park. We have a new apartment building that opened a couple of years down here. Right here is at Highway 13, and Nicollet is the new Orange Line transit-oriented development. So we now, where we didn't before, we now qualify for TOD grants through the Met Council, and the Orange Line opened in December, I want to say, just opened. So we're happy to be a part of that, and that certainly adds value to this huge redevelopment project. Here's the Cub Foods, and then we have another big apartment building under construction here. So when we talk about Heart of the City, we talk about these grants leveraging dollars. We went from a neighborhood area plan, started with how can we make streetscaping, to a full redevelopment plan, got a little over $4 million from the Met Council. We're able to leverage that to get some federal grants as well, along with private reinvestment. And we went from something that this area was paying about $200,000 in taxes back in 1999. And I haven't ran the numbers recently, but it's probably say 10 years after that, maybe 15 years after that, it's 4 to 5 million. So it's 20 to 25 fold that the payback is on these projects. They're not easy. They're not without stress, consternation, projects falling apart. That has happened. But we were able to meet the goals of the project. So in Heart of the City, our goals were redevelopment. So we can check that box. Affordable housing. We made a commitment with the grants that 20% of the units would be considered affordable, whether owner occupied or rental. And we achieved that along the way. We wanted to create jobs, and we did that with adding the retail and the Cub Foods. Those weren't there before. So we were able to add jobs and vitality to the area. Another project I want to talk about is our Valley Ridge Strip Center project, I guess. It seems like every community might have a strip center from the 50s or the 60s, the suburban ones anyways that we're talking about. So this is a 14-acre site that was on the west side of Burnsville, on Burnsville Parkway and County Road 5. And you can see the pictures here, just a single story, nothing too exciting, way more parking than was needed. You know, this was a grocery store back in the day and a hardware store. I mean, it really was an activity center, but here it was 2008, 2009, and it was all but empty. And so the city had done a aging strip center study, and we did that with a previous Met Council grant as well, I believe, and looked at all the strip centers in the city and what can we do with them. So we had this plan in place. This can be something bigger and better. And so we actually applied for grants twice on this project. We were turned down the first time. You don't always get what you want, but you never give up. And so you go back again. And so on this particular project, we partnered with the Dakota County Community Development Agency. They are our housing authority pretty much for most of Dakota County. And then Presbyterian Homes at the time was looking for a place to do assisted senior living facility in Burnsville, looking for the right site. I remember being fully developed, it's hard to find sites. So what we did on this project is we actually brought the two together, right? Because people contact me, Jenny, I'm looking for land, I want to do this. I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. So we are able to kind of put the pieces together and bring the developers together. And that's what we did on this. The city was not the applicant for the grant. We certainly support the grant, but the site was redeveloped with TBRA funding on this one that was given to Press Homes. And what we ended up with this is what it looks like in 2011 when it opened. That's just part of the site, by the way. And so we have an affordable housing project that is on the left side, the taller side of the building. That's owned and operated by the Dakota County CDA as affordable units. Assisted living is on the right-hand side of the building. Presbyterian Homes has a long-term lease with the CDA to operate this. And that helps make that assisted living product more affordable than it otherwise would be, because this is a tax exempt property, so they don't have to have that like they normally would. And then of course, with the grants that went into the program to help with the costs as well. And then more recently, the Dakota County CDA sold the rest of the land to Quick Trip, which just opened a couple of years ago, and now under construction right now is a 110 unit luxury apartment complex. So in the end, you know, this is started in 2010. So this will be like a 15-year redevelopment type project to get us from that strip mall, right, to something that's fully developed. So another great example and use of the grant funds that were available to us. Some things more recent, we did get a TOD planning grant. In addition to project grants, the Met Council has planning grants. And so we received one for $60,000 from the Met Council a couple of years ago to help us create the new zoning district for the transit-oriented development for the Orange Line. So what started out as heart of the city zoning is now changed to TOD, since we do have the Orange Line there. Higher densities are allowed and more pedestrian-oriented amenities, I would say. So we were able to apply for grant and were successful to help create that new ordinance. And then last year, we received a little over 400,000 from the TBRA account to clean up a parcel in the Minnesota River Quadrant. So this is located between Highway 13 and the city of Bloomington, the Minnesota River. It's kind of down in that area where our landfills are. We have some pretty bad soils and some contamination in that area. So with this grant, we were able to help the developer close a $3.5 million gap to clean up the property. And that's pretty significant. We also used TIF dollars and some other county grant funds that we had to close that gap. But what's under construction now, which is going to create a lot of jobs, we have 232,000 square feet of high demand office warehouse space that's going up right here, this close to the metro. They're pretty excited about the location, but I will tell you, it took us 2 years to work with this developer from beginning to permitting. It just takes that long to get through the process. And we were very fortunate that we had a developer who could see the opportunity in this site and stick in there with us as we went through the process to help them close that gap. So we recently signed on for another 10 years. So we recommitted, I guess, as you would say. We are in it through 2030, and I just wanted to talk about the goals, how this affects the community like Tara talked about. So we are committing to our goal, and it's a range because again, this goes to zoning. So of 146 to 266 units, and then our life cycle goal is 900. From our perspective, our council unanimously approved this because what Tara said, it's a goal. I don't want to say aspirational, but it is something we want to happen. We're working towards that happening. It seems like we're continually adding new tools to the toolbox in Burnsville, from ADUs, accessory dwelling units, to some new housing programs. So we are on that track, and certainly given all the apartments that are under construction all over the metro, we've created the opportunity for more affordable housing units to be constructed with these numbers. So in our 2040 comp plan, now this was done, 5-6 years ago at that time, we had 266 new, we planned for, with high density zoning, at least 266 new affordable units. 584 overall. So I just want to highlight that this is, I know Tara talked about some cities may shy away from this because they don't want to overcommit. And I think she's right, but it's not something to be afraid of because there is no penalty. And so at the time, this is what our goals are. And I think we're going to make it actually, which would be wonderful at the end of the day. So yeah, we're going to get there. Some of the challenges with the program, and this should come as no surprise to Tara, but the grant dollars are limited. There just isn't enough money, and they're competitive. So you don't always get the grant that you ask for, which can make it tough when you're dealing with a developer who has to wait on timing. And that's the other thing I talk about. So we can apply, we can support this project. We may get this, we may not. And if you don't get it, it really is a letdown if that's something that they were counting on, and then they got to go back to try to figure out how to make the financing work. Sometimes a developer just can't wait. They're just going to take the cost on and raise the rents because they got to get this going. They have other commitments in line. So from my standpoint, working with the developers, that can be a challenge as well. So why would a city want to participate? Of course, you have the ability to qualify for the grants. The grants can help facilitate your redevelopment goals and increase your tax base. It affirms our position to support affordable housing. It builds on our partnership with the Met Council. I would say that Burnsville has had, as long as I've been there, and continues to have a great relationship with the Met Council, with our local sector rep, and with Tara. She came and presented to our council, who wanted to know a little bit more about this program. And you heard the great presentation that she gave, and she won them all over. And it was a unanimous decision to join for another 10 years. And so really, once I think folks get the information and can see, like, why wouldn't you do this? There's no cost, there's no harm if your goals are not met. There's no good reason not to participate from my point of view in the program. And so that's where I'll leave it at that. Again, my name is Jenny Faulkner. There's my email. I'm the Community Development Director at the City of Burnsville, and I will stand for any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Jenny, for bringing the municipal perspective forward. One question that I will ask on behalf of the CMAL group, our Metro League of Women Voters group, we've done interviews with municipal planners and elected officials over the past few years. And one thing that we pick up on occasionally, was that in some of the smaller jurisdictions, they feel they don't have adequate staffing to apply for grants, and not just the livable communities, but any grant money. Is that something you're familiar with? Or maybe, Tara, you've got some idea. Some municipalities feel they're just too small to compete. They don't have staff. Is that an issue that you've addressed at all?
Well, here's what I would say, Karen, is that, yeah, you need staff, you need the information, but a lot of small cities also use consultants, right? Because they don't have enough staff. So they may have a planning consultant that works with multiple cities, or an engineering consultant that works with multiple cities. And when Heart of the City was started, we had one of our consultants actually help apply for those grants. These consultants that cities work with are very familiar with all the grants that are out there, whether it's DEED or Met Council, and they can help you get the public funding, and federal dollars to get the public funding for your project. So just because a city is small, I would encourage them to check with their consultants, assuming they have some, and start there. But it can be done, and you have to do the reporting, but it's once a year, which isn't too bad of a thing to do if we're tracking these projects like you would be anyways. So I would just encourage, and Tara can speak to the competitiveness of a small city versus a big city, but resource-wise to apply, I don't see that there should be a big challenge. And also, Karen, if you know another city that needs help, call another city, right? We're happy to help. I can't help you write the grant, but I can help answer a question or call them at council. So we are resources for each other.
Absolutely. Jenny said it perfectly, and I'll just add that that is one of the potential uses of those pre-development funds, is to pay for that consultant. So even if the cost of a consultant seems to be the issue, we really feel like we're trying to offer the resources for folks at different places to get a project that's going to be competitive, ready to go. The other thing I'll add is just that that it is actually a very real thing to look at. I'll just, as an example, are we just scoring straight up for units? So this project has 80 affordable units at 60% AMI. This project has 20. Well, the 80 units is going to score higher, right? we're trying to look at that a lot more nuanced. So what is the context of the community in which those units are available? How many versus more being than just like, oh, this is more units than that. How efficiently is the project using the site? So maybe it's 60 units, but maybe it's on twice as big of a site or 3 times as big of a site than a project with 30 units, right? So are we thinking about the context and about the impact so that we can score in a relatively apples to apples way, even across communities that are very different? Because the impact of 30 units in a city with very few options and very little multifamily development, and maybe also a lot of low wage jobs, you know, with very little affordable housing nearby. You know, we're trying to be so holistic. The problem is then you get so holistic and you end up being in that everything's important, so nothing's important place. So it is a constant challenge and calibration and recalibration to try to figure out how to think about the projects we get contextually. And we are very aware of, you know, sometimes by the nature of the program, it's going to favor, you know, more urban development types, and trying to figure out how to do that while we're still being sure that we are furthering the goals of the program. So it's a balancing act.
Well, thank you. So we had an earlier question, and for either of you to speak to, the questioner is asking, is there any connection between the way this program operates and the homelessness problem that we see in the region? Are there any intersections that you can speak to?
Yes, Karen, thanks. And I did, not being sure there'd be time to get to it verbally, I did throw in an answer in the chat for folks to read. In terms of the Met Council's role in addressing homelessness, the majority of that work has landed on the Metro HRA, who issues the housing choice vouchers for many parts of the region, though not all parts of the region. Some counties and cities still receive their HUD dollars for Section 8 vouchers directly and administer them in their jurisdiction. Metro HRA, you know, serves multiple suburban areas in Ramsey County and in Hennepin County, as well as I believe Carver County and Scott County, I think. I'm going to get in trouble here, but big chunk of the region we serve. And so those vouchers, not just the ones that we already had, but the director of the Metro HRA, Terry Smith, is phenomenal. She's amazing. She applies for every extra voucher she can get from the federal government. And there are these streams of vouchers you can apply for that are really specific. And she has gotten, you know, scores and scores of additional vouchers in addition to our regular vouchers that are specifically for helping folks experiencing homelessness and living outside. And she's worked really hard with her team, building capacity, finding additional support, and Metro Transit Police. They've created a housing action team, and they work together to sort of connect directly and personally with folks who are living outside, and especially folks who are sheltering on transit, because that's, you know, we own and operate that. And so helping to, you know, really connect folks to those vouchers, or folks who aren't ready for those vouchers, get them the support that they need to be ready to use those vouchers as soon as they can. There's still a lot of challenges. It's so not a panacea, but the majority of the directly trying to address homelessness work at the council is done by the HRA. I see the LCA role as making sure that we are heavily prioritizing those deeply affordable units, because folks who are living outside, folks who are experiencing chronic homelessness, are definitely going to be one of the groups of folks needing that that housing cost at, you know, well below the 30% AMI threshold.
Thanks very, very much. Another point was made that because real property taxes are so regressive, it seems that state and federal income tax would be a better income stream to support and assist low-income families. Do you, Tara, do you at Met Council do any lobbying at the federal level in particular on this issue? Because the big number about how many dollars are captured by the mortgage deduction could probably solve the homelessness problem in the whole country. So does Met Council work on that at all, or is that something that you guys shy away from?
Not really. And I think more so than it's like, oh, let's not touch that, is that we just really see our partners at the state housing agency, the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, as the experts and the much more experienced federal funding allocators. I mean, outside of the housing choice vouchers we get for our Metro HRA program, we don't administer tax credits, we don't issue housing bonds, we don't, we don't see a lot of direct federal dollars. And so, it's really been, LCA has really been this piece where uniquely in the country, a regional body of government has the authority to do some taxing to support this redevelopment grant program. So we do tend to kind of stay out of that lane. We're always advocating for more funding from anywhere, but work with and support our partners at Minnesota Housing, but really see that role as as theirs.
Thank you very much. Another comment is that, and Jenny mentioned it too, it's not just cities who apply for these funds. There are other governmental entities that have the authority to apply for these dollars.
Correct. The statute actually says that county development agencies and port authorities can also apply for the funds, but the projects have to be in LCA participating cities. And, it's not regulated statutorily, but the best practice and just the political reality is that no county or port authority is going to apply for those funds if the city isn't supportive of the project. So, it's almost always done with some level of partnership with the city, but then for various reasons, the actual applicant may be the county or port authority, and that just means that the legal documents, the grant agreements are signed by their staff, not the city staff, and the draw requests come through them, not through the city. So it's more on kind of the technical administrative side, but from outside that, it all sort of looks and operates the same.
And Karen, that could help a small city as well. If they don't have their own HRA, they should go to their county HRA and work with them and have them apply for the grant. That's another great resource for those folks.
Very interesting. Are there additional questions from our group today? I'm not seeing any. I would like to be sure to thank Tara and Jenny. It's a burden to take a Saturday morning away from your private life, your personal life, and we value that, your interest in our organization. And I just want to thank you for great programs and so much information. It's almost a little overwhelming, but thank you so much. I see one more message here. Very good. Well, so we did have some public officials here on this call, so it's good when they can get a little more information and a little more encouragement right from the people who know how it works. I'd like to thank Marty Mix again for being our Zoom host. And I would like to thank everybody who signed in this morning. And now we can all go outside, have lunch, and do our yard work or sweeping or whatever. And thank you to QCTV and for your interest in our program today. So I guess we'll give a silent. I miss the loud applause that we can do and hugs. All that is gone, but we can at least use our new Zoom skills. So thank you, Tara. Thank you, Jenny. And thanks to everybody who signed on.